Welcome back to the Indie Worldwide podcast. Today I interviewed Ross. He is building many things. We went from building probably the world's largest database of cheese data to African goat farmers to how Ross got involved with a private jet manufacturer via this cheese app. Enjoy. So I wanted to talk to you about Cheezus. Because what is that and how did you get started?
Oh, that's a good question. So it was, I wish it had like this really great like origin story, but it kind of doesn't. It was one of those, I live in France. I like to eat cheese and I like to drink wine. And so one Sunday, me and my wife were sitting there drinking wine, eating cheese, and I'm an avid Vivino user. So do you know Vivino? You know, you can scan the bottle of wine. So you can take a picture of the bottle
I'm
of wine.
uncultured, man. I don't know anything. I don't live in France and not sipping on cheeses and drink.
So yeah,
eating wines.
I like wine, and so when Vivino came out, it allowed you to take pictures of the bottle of wine or the label, and it would tell you, it would rate it as well. It would give you a rating, and it would tell you about it and stuff like that. And so I was just taking a picture of the label of the bottle of wine I was drinking, and my wife said to me, "Why isn't there a Vivino for cheese?" And I was like, "That's a good question." And I had that look on my face because immediately I was like, "Can this work?" And she went, "Don't, Ross." And I was like, "No, bear with me." And she went, "No, honestly, like, because I've got about a million things on the go at the same time always." For her, it was just like, this is just another thing. Like, please don't. And I went, but I know it's possible. So I'd previously worked on a blockchain project called Goat Cash, and we created
Goat Cash, Goat Cash. Okay.
Yeah, like the goats. It was goats. Everything to do with goats. It was like 8-bit goats. So me and a few friends built like little dApps and stuff like that, and one of them was we were trying to find a way to distribute these goat tokens to everyone. So instead of mining them, we were like, we'll get people to upload pictures of goats, and we'd score them like top trumps, like we'd give them a top trump rating for their originality. And the thing is, it gets harder. So we made it so it was like mining. So if you just uploaded a picture from Google, it knew what that was because it just went, well, we know we've already had this one. So unless you owned your own goats and they were like unique pictures, it wouldn't give you any goat tokens. So it got to a point where we had like hundreds of thousands of pictures of goats, and loads of people in Africa who actually genuinely owned goats were just taking pictures of their own goats every day to try and get more goat cash. And so I knew that it was physically possible to do like. And I'm a big fan of Silicon Valley as well. And Silicon Valley, like the HBO show, did like hot dog, not hot dog. And that's what got us to like goat, not goat. And so it would come up going, if you tried to put a picture of a sheep up, it went, it's not a goat, it's a sheep. And so I knew that it was physically possible from a machine learning point of view to tell what it was. But then as you start to get into it, so I work on my day job, I work in product management at a big pharmaceutical company. So they make lots of, I work with scientists, or I work with product teams who work with scientists to build stuff to help them discover new drugs. And I was talking to the guys in the machine learning and our data product line, and they were like, it's a real big data problem because you need a lot of pictures to make it reliable. And you do, like, to train the model on the first amount of cheeses we had, we needed like 8,000 images per cheese. And
wow.
That's just to get like, and as soon as that starts to grow, so if you've got 10 cheeses, 8,000 per cheese, that's fine. You get about 96% accuracy. But as soon as you then start adding other cheeses in there with like small multiples, so if you have like one picture of this cheese, like it becomes very difficult. So you need, because if you think about a cheese, and this is where it gets really nerdy, but like in a really like data way, because a cheese can look completely different depending on how it's cut, the angle it's at, how mature it is, everything like that. So it's actually really difficult to get like full accuracy on cheese. So that's how it came about, and I thought this will be quite fun to build. And then as I was going along, I thought, you know, and I was like, fuck, I should probably try and monetize this in some way because I've built this thing. I should probably do something with it. And so then I was like, okay, well, I can find ways to put like affiliate links in there for the pairings. Because what you can do is you can take a picture of cheese. It tries to identify it, but the bigger it's getting, the harder it actually is because we have so many cheeses now. And I think I've got something like, I think there's over 250,000 pictures of cheese that I actually have now, which is ridiculous.
We'll have the largest data set of cheese images in the entire world at this point.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And so we've hit about 3,000, just over 3,000 users. But I haven't advertised it in any way. I predominantly just use search, App Store optimization because I realized that that's how everyone was finding it. So I look at all of the stats, and this is one of the things that I really enjoy. It's like you look at your distribution channels, and it's like, well, from a lot of people actually Google Vivino for cheese and find us because we're down as that. That was our strapline for ages, and so if you find something like that, it comes directly to us. So from a search engine optimization, that directs people directly to us, and we probably get about, I don't know, 400 or 500 people a month that search for that, which is quite a surprising number.
So they're searching for cheese identifier? What are they searching for?
No, for Vivino for cheese.
Oh, Vino for cheese. So they're specifically looking for your problem. They're sitting with their wives, they're sipping on cheeses, they're eating wines, and they're saying, why doesn't this exist for cheese? But only one man, maybe two, has decided to go and build it.
Yeah, exactly. Some idiot. And it was one of those I just thought, oh, it'll be quite fun. I like cheese and stuff. And then over 20...
But did you do keyword research, or you were just like, this should exist?
No,
and then later you found out, oh, I guess other people thought that too.
Yeah, it was purely based on what I just thought that it was. It's like, back in the day, everything was the Uber of something. It's the like Uber of fucking whatever. Like,
yeah,
it was the thing. And so the best way, and when I built my previous startups as well, it was like, how can you make it in one sentence that people will understand what your thing is? So it was like, it's the Vivino for cheese, and that was just the thing. Obviously, you have to know Vivino in the first place, but if you do, like, it's Vivino for cheese, and so that became the thing. And it was really funny actually because we've got a TV show. It's similar to Shark Tank in the US, but it's called Dragon's Den, and there's a cheese company went on there called Cheese Geek, and they do cheese subscription boxes and stuff like that. And they went on there and they actually got funding. So they do different stuff to us, but they specifically mentioned in there because they have a recommendation engine. They were like, oh, we're like the Vivino for cheese, and they specifically mentioned those words, and they clearly had not done any keyword research themselves on using that, because when that first aired on like BBC in the UK, we got like immediately like 200 downloads instantly that night, and nice. It was crazy because they didn't know the name of this company. Because it was one of those, they were like, what's the company called? So all they remembered was Vivino for cheese. So they just Googled it. So every now and then, I think this is another reason, because it gets aired on Dave and all these other repeating channels. So every time people want to find it, they search for that because they can't remember the name, and then they find me. So it's been like everyone messaged me and was like, oh my God, someone else is doing cheese. And I'm like, it's fine. There's plenty of people doing cheese. We're all good.
So are you number one for Vivino for cheese?
Yeah, if you search for Vivino for cheese, you will 100%.
Vivino for cheese. Number one, Cheezus, the Vivino of cheese. Yep. Perfect. And it's a free app, right?
Is it
monetized in any way?
It isn't at the moment, and that's kind of the next step. And I've built out most of the stuff to do it, and it's essentially a marketplace. So my idea is, again, I left this kind of going, and it just organically grew. And then over 2020, obviously everyone's working situation kind of changed, and I just didn't really have much time for it. I was still concentrating on trying to homeschool 3 children, all that sort of stuff. So I just was like, I just left it, and it all organically did its thing. And then at the end of 2020, because I'd built up quite a connection and a good network of cheese people that worked in the cheese industry, I realized that the biggest customer for cheese companies was hospitality, so restaurants, hotels, and stuff like that, and they all shut down. So 70% of cheese producers, their biggest customer, 70% of it is hospitality, because most cheese producers that don't sell to supermarkets because they cut the margins too strong, and so they don't make money from supermarket deals. They want big volume and they want big margins for themselves. So they make no money. So they rely on hospitality to pay them fairly, so their margins are bigger. They get a bigger profit, and it's smaller amounts. So they're not forced to mass-produce cheese. They can still do what they like as artisans, and they still get paid fairly for it. But that was all taken out. And so it meant that they were struggling to then get a B2C model. So in that, I went, this is a real opportunity for us in general to try and create a new customer channel for cheese producers. So I've actually built a whole plugin and so I did a lot of research, and I realized that the majority of cheese producers in the world use either WooCommerce, so obviously WordPress with WooCommerce plugin, Shopify, or there was one other, I can't remember what it is. They're the main ones though. That covers about 70% of all cheese producers. And so I was like, well, but they're shit at advertising. They're so bad at advertising themselves and marketing. It's like most creators, right? We love to build stuff, and they love to make cheese. They love to make it, and they're not really good at selling their story. And their stories are super interesting. People are interested, but they're not very good at getting out there. They're like, we've got a website, so people are going to find it. It's like, no one's going to find it. They're not specifically searching for you. Why would they? So it's quite an easy sell, because you go, well, we've built a plugin for your online store. So when they have an online store, it automatically syncs to our back end. So we just have a WooCommerce back end that syncs to our app. So we have a plugin on our side, a plugin on their side. So one's like a slave, one's a master, and it can automatically pull in. And we have categories on our side per producer, and it breaks it all down. So it will automatically render the cheese in our app. We take the payments on our side and we pass on the payments manually to them, but we haven't released it yet because the main hurdle we actually have to deal with is the location side of things. So I want to launch geographically, so I'll start in one country because it's easier to do that way, but then it makes it more difficult from a code base as well, managing all these code bases. So that's where it's starting to get complicated, but that is the next step. And I wanted to get to a certain number of users before I started to roll out this paid amount, but recently I've started to focus more on the marketing side. So I created a TikTok for it a couple of weeks ago. So I was like, look, I should probably capitalize on the fact that people like TikTok and there are loads of people on there. So I should probably look at that as an acquisition channel. And it's been actually really popular. So, and people are actually messaging me or commenting on the videos saying, where can I buy this? Like, where can I buy this cheese online? And because there's no way to do it, it's like people like this it's like product market fit, right? It's like this cements the fact that I should release this ability to be able to sell cheeses. So the next step for me is to just push this update to the app so people can buy cheeses through the app. So that's the next stage. That's what I really want to get to monetization.
I think I found you on TikTok. Are you at Cheezus app?
That's us, yeah.
All right, nice. So let's do the numbers. There's no revenue, right? Is it expensive to run this? Are you burning money?
No, it's not burning. Don't get me wrong. It's I think total costs to run it is about €100 a month total.
Okay. So it's not nothing, but it's not crazy either, especially if you have another job.
And so the cost to date to get to this point, development and everything included to run it, is probably about €7,000, €7,000, something like that. So I've done it really. I spent a lot on my previous startups and for nothing. So I was like, nah, this is being severely cut, and I have to do everything I have to make sure it works. I have to make sure that I pick the right channels. Hence the reason I focused on App Store optimization, because people search for cheese app, it comes up. I purposely picked the things that I could do and I could do myself without having to spend money on doing it, and then testing those first. So that's my biggest things I wanted to do, rather than just chuck money at the problem and see if it creates product market fit, because that's not going to work.
This is a good indie hacker instinct, I think, to actually try to test and be more efficient with your dollar.
That whole thing of when you have money, it's very easy to chuck at it and not get the value from it. And this is where I think that indie hackers have this one up against VC funded companies, because they got money, but they spend it, but they don't really get that same value for it. When you have a finite amount of it and it's very small, every penny counts to where you put it. You just think, well, I'll either put it here or put it here. Like, we either develop something or fix a bug or we do something else. Like, you have to make a choice, and then you really think about the value of what you're putting your money towards. Whereas with a VC, you just chuck it out, but then you stop really counting what makes a difference, what makes an impact. And so all my day job in product has made me analyze everything I do in a bigger way. Like, look at the numbers, look what has an impact. If I'm doing this, it's got to make an impact. I'm not just going to keep advertising or keep doing something if it's not actually valuable in the long run.
It's interesting. At the Indie Worldwide Mastermind earlier today, exact same thing came up. We were talking about the best way to bootstrap a business, when should you raise, and this idea of like having that financial pressure to actually be really efficient sometimes leads to more creativity versus let me just throw bodies at it. Let me just throw money at the problem and see if it solves itself. Because sometimes, you maybe get stuck in a local maximum there. You don't realize, oh, there's this other much more efficient way I could have spent that money if only I had, really focused on what the problem was and what my customers wanted.
I'd be interested to see what the opinion was on when you should raise. What came out of that? Because I've got my own opinion, but I'd be interested in what the general consensus was about when you should raise.
Yeah, so the consensus at Mastermind today seemed to be raise money once you've already hit product market fit and found like your distribution channel that you can scale up by putting money into it, and not before then. I think there's counter arguments we can make for that. Like, that's kind of a luxury that you can only have if you have a job that gives you enough time to also work on a startup, or already have had an exit or something to like be able to fundraise for yourself. But assuming that you can do it, I think it's obviously better to like retain control and not raise money until you know how you're going to spend the money.
Yeah, I would have definitely said, like, so my default would be, and this has changed over the years. Like, previously I would have said otherwise, it was the aim to raise in my previous startups. That was like the thing. Whereas now I 100% would say raising is for scale. Like, that's all you want to do. Like, you can't scale because you have the interest, it's there. And if you want to capitalize on that interest in the market, that's where you raise the money, because you need that money to scale, because you just can't get in quick enough to meet the demand. But otherwise, I wouldn't. So personally, I wouldn't. I'm not interested in raising. I'm happy to do this myself. But equally, I have the luxury to be able to afford to then bootstrap that along the way. So my burn rate is like, I could do that forever if I wanted to at the moment. But equally, I'd like it at some point not to just be a drain the entire time. It is more of a passion project because I do love what I do there, and I think it's really interesting. But ultimately, I'm not gonna babysit a passion project for my entire life if it doesn't ever amount to anything. So hence the increased focus these days of actually trying to do the thing that most indie makers hate, and that's marketing and working out the best distribution channels. So yeah, and finding
really
that focus
important.
as well, which place to focus, I think, is a big one.
I think it's really important to know what game you're playing and why you're playing it, right? Like, if you're trying to build a nuclear fusion reactor, you need money for that kind of project. You have to raise. That's not what most indie hackers are trying to do. That's not what our goals are, right? We're trying to build that support like our particular lifestyle. They don't need to ever go public or be unicorn status. And even if they do, if it's pure software, you might be able to bootstrap your way there and have much better like personal, financial, and lifestyle outcome than if you raised money and now that you've raised money, you got to go spend it. If you don't know how you're going to spend it, then why did you raise it? Yeah,
and I think the common misconception is that you can buy product market fit, but you can't. If it is there, it's there. You can truly hack and bootstrap your way to product market fit if you do it like dirty enough. Especially nowadays with no code. If you really want to, again, it depends. It can't be a friggin' nuclear fusion reactor or anything like that, because that's hardware based and it's really difficult. But predominantly nowadays, if it's a product, if it's a SaaS product, if it's most of the time, even from an app, especially with things like no code and stuff as well, like, you can get something together pretty cheaply, even if you're just trying to test that market in that way. If you get something out there and just slowly try and get it a bit better, and you're working. But this also comes back to your business model. If you haven't got a business model that you've thought about in the long run, Like I thought mine was going to be completely different to what it is now. I thought I was just purely going to use like because every cheese has like different pairings with it as well. So I wanted to just have every time you clicked on it, it says you can shop now, and it has an affiliate link in there. So it's all affiliate based. Like so we'd make some money back from there, and I thought we'd do that, and it actually had adverts in there as well. So I had adverts on the app, and I got rid of them all because it just made it messy. And I was like, I have a longer term plan. I'm going to focus more on acquisition at the moment because I need the numbers. Because if I'm going to then launch in my revenue model, I need people to then buy it to do it in the first place. So it's like, okay, focus on marketing, growing the numbers. I can afford to do that now. That's a luxury I have, hence my strategy. If it wasn't a luxury I had, I would completely change my strategy in doing it. No, so I think every time you build something, you have to look at your own personal situation and think, I can't afford to fund this for a year before I monetize, or I can't afford to do this until then. So you go, what is my road to revenue and what should that look like? And that's hence the reason a lot of people are like, you need to do it straight away. Like your road to revenue should be like straight away. And if you can't get revenue straight away, then whatever. But I think it's something that you need to try and make sure fits your scenario.
I'm seeing an opposite trend, a counter trend rising as well, of the build an audience first, figure out monetization later. Because if you can get attention, you can figure out what to sell. And oftentimes the hard part is getting attention in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And this is another reason for things like trying to build up an audience on things like TikTok and stuff like that, because and it all falls in that same way. It doesn't matter if it's Twitter, it doesn't matter if it's whatever platform. If you're trying to get a number of people together, and then you can then the one thing I heard is like every time you're doing something, it should never always be a sell, but it should be like, this is something that you're interested in, and then every third one is a call to action. So you do a thing, you do a thing, you do a thing. People are interested, they're entertained, whatever, and then you just lay in a call to action like every third one. So it's not repetitive. So people aren't like, stop selling me this thing. You're like, you're bringing them in for the entertainment or the information or whatever it is, and then you're trying to convert afterwards. So this is how I tend to try and do things on TikTok, for example. I try and give Cheezus. Like the whole thing about Cheezus was trying to give information and education on cheese, what goes with what, advice on different cheeses, like people might not have heard of them. So it was all around that sort of education. And then afterwards, it was like, okay, how can we actually then do the conversion side of them making people want to buy it? So I try and like carry this ethos through into the different channels as well, especially with the TikTok stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting journey. And Cheezus has definitely it's the one that's been with me for the longest now. I have about 9 million other things that I'm doing at the same time, but this one's it's one I do really enjoy.
So Cheezus is the Vivino for cheese. So how does Vivino monetize? What is their model?
It was really interesting because I actually followed a similar model to theirs, and it wasn't on purpose. It was purely because of the need I saw through Corona, basically, and then. I realized that it was similar to what they did. So they equally went on the full acquisition side, and they were just trying to grow numbers, and they didn't really have a direct monetization strategy. They equally, if you wanted to buy one, they had exterior links. So again, that was what I followed. Like if you saw a wine that you liked, took a picture of it, and you were like, great, and it's like, it's available to buy here. And it would send you to a shop, and I'm sure they worked out a deal where they got a kickback on those sorts of things. But they
kind
then
of a convergent evolution.
Yeah, so it's like, whatever, they'd get some CTR rate or whatever it would be. And I thought, okay, we can do that. And then as I changed our model, I realized as well, actually, this is what Vivino did themselves. But they did it in a slightly different way. So they offered wine directly in Vivino, but they do fulfillment and everything. So they have like stuff that they stock themselves. And so it became basically an online place where you can buy wine. So they are like
they're an e-commerce store.
Yeah,
kind of secretly.
So they completely flipped because they got the market. And they were like, well, we've got the market, so we know people are interested in wine. They come here for wine. Why don't we just sell them wine direct? So
Makes a lot of sense. Why don't you just sell cheese?
Exactly. But the way that I wanted to do it was instead of having to do all the fulfillment ourselves, because it's much harder with cheese because it's a live thing. Like to ship it to us and then to ship it back out, you have not just the time, but also the risk of all of the stuff along the way. The logistics chain is a pain in the ass. Hence the reason I was like, we can do this in an easier way. Like building this, I in fact I outsourced this, both plugins, the Shopify plugin and the WordPress plugin, to Upwork, and I got them both developed for $250.
Dang, that's pretty good.
I knew exactly what I wanted. I said, this is how it should work. I gave them an existing plugin that synchronized shops, and I said, this one doesn't work in the way that we want it to, but you can use it as a base. I was like, I don't care if you like just rip this apart, like, and then do it in the same way. I was like, but this is what we need to be able to do. We need to be able to synchronize this way, but synchronize directly to different categories, which we couldn't do. And there were a few other things, and they were like, yeah, no problem, we'll do that. And they did it within, I think, 3 days. And so it's like, it feels a bit like hacked together, because it's like, oh, it's just using WordPress basically, but it works. Like it's an effective, and it just then everything appears on the app. So we've got it in test and everything, and it's a really effective way of using like technology in a basic way. Like it's, so many people go like native and stuff, and so our app's still built in Ionic, so it's cross-platform. We'd use Revolut payments on there, so that was easy integration. So everything was just like simple stuff that we just pushed together. And I don't do any of it myself, but I used to come from like more of a technical background than I am now, but never development-wise. So I'm the most annoying person for any developer to work with, because I know that stuff's possible, and I'm like, well, you can just do it like this, and they're like, yeah, okay, Ross, yeah, fine, yeah. And if they go, yeah, but it's not that easy, and I'm like, well, but it is. You just, all we've got to do is that, and they're like, okay, yeah, fine, whatever. But every time they just get annoyed, because I'm like, yeah, but I know how I want it to go. Sometimes I just let them go. And one of the guys actually I work with now, more on a full-time basis, not full-time, but like he's a part of the Cheezus team. He was from Upwork originally, so he did the original app work. I did the design stuff, he did the building, and I obviously paid him for that. But now he's a part of the team, so I've known him for 3-4 years now. And so he originally did some other work on Upwork for me, and I just kept using him because he was great. He was a really good guy. And so now I'd class him as a friend. He's a really good guy from Egypt, and he does a lot of different work for me. We're working on another couple of things as well. We've got another kind of machine learning thing for a VI. I live right next to the airport, and there's a company there that builds VIP jets. So it's for, sheikhs and princes and all that sort of stuff. So if you want your jet completely stripped out and refitted, then they do it there. But every design has to go through a lot of checks, and all these checks are manual. So often it comes to a point where the designer gives the design to the customer, they say yes, and then they bring it back to the engineers. The engineers say, well, this isn't physically possible because we've run the checks on it, and this chair's too close to a door, and you can't have that for safety reasons. And so they have to comply to certain rules. But this happens like 8 times in revolutions that just go around, and all these different revisions happen, and it costs them a ton of money. And so someone came to me and said, can we do this in a better way? And I went, I'm pretty sure we can. So this is like another side project that we're doing very like stealthily, really, because it's pre-stealth. And but we're using another technology that he's never used, which is semantic segmentation, which is essentially what Tesla cars use. So it's what they use to identify what a car is a car, but you can't just have it so it identifies. So for example, if I held this beer can up, if you used image classification, it just puts a box around it and it says beer can, and it can recognize that in the same way cheese, it goes, this is cheese. But with semantic segmentation, it would draw a full outline around the perimeter or the edge of the actual thing, because you want it to just show that thing. And so this is exactly what we're using for that, because if you upload designs of a plane to it, it will show you exactly where a chair is, because we need to be able to do measurements and checks across stuff. So we're essentially building this stealth tool that allows people to upload drawings of planes, and it tells you whether it's compliant or not. So yeah, it's all like different ways that we've learned because of Cheezus. We're like, Cheezus was like the base, where like I suppose goats was the base, and then you go, well, I know, and then you go, well, I know it's possible. It's just the next step after this. It's like we just do that, And so yeah, I work with him on that as well. So we do.
So somehow you've gone from goat farmers in Africa to private jet manufacturer, or customizer.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I can draw the line. Makes perfect sense.
It's a day in the life of my ADHD. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like one thing I'm over there and I'm going, oh, I fancy doing that. That seems like a good idea. So yeah, I love the variety though. For me but I love learning an industry as well. For me, it's one of the best parts about it. Like I hate to do something without truly understanding that industry, and so my first startup was in edtech, and so I learned so much about all the different education industry, everything like that. And my best moment was at a massive edtech conference in Vegas. I was at one of their like sponsored events, and something like Blackboard, one of the biggest learning management systems, was hosting an event there. And I was there talking to all of these PhDs at the bar about how it was really technical about how people learn and what we were doing, all these sorts of stuff, and have a conversation. And one of the people there was like, "Where did you get your PhD?" And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And they were like, "Well, you must
what?
Yeah, it's like, "Well, clearly you've done a PhD in psychology or something." And I went, "No." I went, "I don't even have a degree." I was like, "I dropped out of university like in my second year, and it definitely wasn't to do with psychology." And they're like, "How do you know all this stuff?" Like, I just learned it. Like, I really enjoyed doing it. If I'm going to do something, like, I want to make sure it's right. So I will like rabbit hole down it and just absolutely learn it. And that's what I love. And I love Twitter for that as well, because it just sends me down different paths. And I think there are so many people building really cool things that it just, yeah, it's like a blessing and a curse, because it's like, oh, that's cool, I like that. And you're like, Ross, calm down, put the shiny object away. But yeah, I just love following other people's journeys and seeing what they're building. And it's hugely motivational, especially on the days where you feel like I just can't be bothered. Like I feel like sometimes you just feel like you've been beaten a few times, and it takes quite a lot of like self motivation, and sometimes you just don't have it. But that's what I love Twitter for. I love being able to see what other people are doing, and that just drives me forward. That's like, it's okay. You pick yourself back up. You can do this, and it's great. It's one of my
started getting a lot more done when I stopped trying to stop myself from following the rabbit hole down. You know, like when something's interesting, in that moment, it's the most interesting thing in the world, and the energy is bottomless that you can pour into it. And the next day, maybe not anymore. So now I just try to like follow the rabbit as far down as I can, versus trying to rein myself in and say, no, that's unrelated to the thing you're supposed to be doing.
That's really...
So maybe the thing I'm supposed to be doing isn't actually the most high leverage thing I could be doing.
That's 100% true. One of the things I learned probably towards the end of last year, was that, like, stop fighting. Like, if you try and fight yourself, then you are way more...
You end up doing nothing. You're just wasting your time fighting yourself. Whereas...
And feeling shit for
if you use the energy, at least you could have done this other thing.
Yeah.
If you're... The thing you're supposed to do, it wasn't going to happen either way, right? So might as well do the thing that you want to do.
This is 100% this. This is so true. And every time you try and force yourself to do the thing that you think you should be doing, you don't want to do it more. Like, they go, no, so like you said, you're not going to get it done. So you may as well just allow yourself to be creative and go where you need to go, because you'll come back. Because you haven't tried to force yourself to come back to it as well, naturally you just come back. And you're probably, and you'll be in a better... Yeah, I know.
There's some tax, there's some things that just have to get done, like paying tax and things like that are always boring and never interesting. And the best thing I think you can do there, if you're a founder with ADHD, which I think is probably a large percentage of founders, to be honest, delegate if at all possible, like figure out how to make it someone else's responsibility versus keeping it all on yourself, and just focus on the things you are good at,
Yeah, I found recently, because I've had a load of admin that I've actually absolutely hated and I'm useless at it. But if I can like time box it and go like, it needs to be done now. Like, so I give myself so it's like that sense of urgency. So it's like, it has to be done right now. Otherwise, I know that it would just enter this black hole of nothingness, and then it just disappears, and then I'm really in the shit. So it's like, if I put that time box behind it, going, shit, it needs to be done now because I've got all these other things, then it helps me go, okay, do it. But if something then is out of my control, like I have to ask someone for something and then I have to wait for it, then it's like, it's grey territory, because it's going to start...
That's why I hate taxes so much in America, especially. It's like you're always stuck waiting on something. Like, I create the time box, I'm going to just do it, I want to finish it. And then I get to a certain point, I'm like, now I have to wait for I don't know how long for this random thing.
We have the same in
it's just-
France. France is just the same, and it's infuriating because I tried, like you say, try and create this potentially. Sometimes it's not a false sense of urgency. Sometimes it's genuinely a sense of urgency because you've procrastinated on it. But
My entire day is just a series of time boxes where there's just urgent things throughout the day, and I only work on urgent things, I guess. So I get a lot done. It's just powered by panic.
yeah, and then it's like kind of this. I find it's kind of cycles as well. So sometimes I feel that it's all on. It's like it's total, just all on. But then I was speaking to my therapist, which has been really useful to help me try and understand. And he just says the same sort of stuff back to me, but like in a better way. And I go, oh yeah, that's really good. Because like this week, I felt for the last 2 weeks, I completely stopped using lists to manage anything. And because I fell out of it for 1 week, it was like the second week was just a given. It was just gone. Routines, difficult, all that sort of stuff. And I was like, I need to get back into this because equally I'm not as productive if I'm not planning my time. If I'm not planning my time, it's a bit chaotic. Stuff will get done, but it's not necessarily the most important stuff or the highest priority or the thing that's going to have this biggest impact. So it's like trying to create some sort of order in the chaos. And I was completely out of it. And then obviously I beat myself up over it, and then I felt really bad that I was out of it. So then when I did write the list, eventually I sat down and went, I'm writing the list, I'm prioritizing it, done. So the next day I went to hit it and went, great. But then I had this huge like pressure that I needed to achieve everything on that list as quickly as possible because I felt like I hadn't done it. And he said that you have to allow yourself both intense focus and bigger picture view. So it's like, instead of feeling guilty when you're not with intense focus, understand that the higher level view when you're not being productive is important because that's the time where you actually think about things in a different way. You're not focused on a particular task, but you're still thinking about all the different things. So instead of feeling guilty that you're not like actively being productive, you are, but just in a different way. And you can't do the two things at the same time. You need to allow yourself the time for both. So instead of feeling guilty about it, realize that they're both valued in different ways. And I was like, oh, okay, that's quite good. I'm still probably going to beat myself up about it, but it was quite a nice way to look at it.
Yeah, I think it's taken me a long time to learn to trust myself to like get things done, or like just trust that inclination of, hey, this is interesting, I need to pursue it.
Yeah.
Because whenever I do, things seem to go well, and whenever I try to push that away, things seem to go worse. And when things go, I don't know if it's an ADHD thing or not, but when things are going well, they seem to get better and better. When things are going worse, they seem to like get worse and worse. I'm not sure if that's a perception thing or like a feedback cycle thing or what, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, and I think it is, for me, it feels like it's that whole fighting thing. Like, if I fight the bad, and instead of just like being like, all right, every time that I try and fight anything, like mentally fight it, it seems to just make things worse. Even if I'm trying to do it for good, it doesn't have a positive impact. So it's like, for me, I feel like if I just allow, like you say, like trust in yourself to just go with it. Just trust yourself to be you and see where it takes you. Instead of fighting it to be someone else or to do things that you think are expected of you. And when stuff goes bad, it's just like this week I had a nightmare because I don't know if you saw on Twitter, but I had a proper ADHD day where that was the day that I was trying to be productive. My internet went off in the morning, it just died, and they said, oh, can you come to the Orange shop to replace your router? And I went, not really ideal because I'm really trying to be productive. This is my first day trying to do my list, and okay, fine. I jumped in my car, or one of my cars, and drove down the road, and I thought, shit, I'm now not productive. So I grabbed my phone and tried to call the hairdresser to make a hair appointment because I was trying to kill two birds with one stone.
Right.
The police drove past me at the time, saw me on my phone, pulled me over. They then were like, you don't have all the paperwork for your car, and because I'm useless at paperwork, obviously, I had no idea where it was. So then they impounded my car.
Oh my God. Oh, jeez.
They impounded my car, and because I live in France, but I have an English license, they were like, we can't give you any like points, which they normally would, for being on the phone. And then they were like, you've been here for too long to have an English license. You need a French one. So we're going to stop you from driving. So now this week, I literally had my car taken away from me. I got banned from driving in France.
Oh my God, dude.
But the funny thing is with that, like that day, like towards the middle of the day, it was like emotionally really draining. And then I stopped fighting it. I just went, it'll be all right. Like, it'll be all right. Like, it's fine. Like, I mean, I'll have to pay to get the car out, but and I need to cycle more anyway. Like, I need to get back being fit again.
That's
like,
the takeaway. Oh, I didn't need that car anyway. I needed a bike more.
Like, I need, and I've been kicking myself for like 4 weeks to get fitter again. Like, because otherwise I just keep focusing on stuff, and I won't prioritize it. But this actually just forces me. So I just turned around and went, well, it's a good opportunity for me to get fit again.
That's definitely one way to put a silver lining on it.
I think you kind of have to, because it's like,
yeah.
I mean, what else can you do? And it's that control
gonna
thing.
stew, just gonna have a great cloud over your head. Yeah.
Yeah. What am I gonna? Yeah. Like, I can't control any of that. I did it. It was my fault. I'm gonna own that. It's no problem. But like, I don't have any control to change it. So
that's the most severe example of like an ADHD tax I've heard of in a while. Like, trying to get done with my
subscriptions that they forgot to cancel. Mine's like, yeah, no, my car got taken.
That's pretty bad, dude. So we started at Cheese App, right? We made our way through Goats in Africa and private jets, then impromptu therapy, and now cars taken away. So I guess that's the story, right? I'm curious, maybe to kind of bring it all the way back.
Yeah.
How many people are using the Cheese app? Give us a sense of scale.
Yeah, so it's about 3,100, I think, is our user base at the moment. So it's around.
Is that daily actives or is that total downloads?
No, it's total downloads. And it's one of those things that I know that. So these are all the things I think about as well, because I know they're not daily active, but I don't expect people to be daily active on it as well, because why would you be daily active on a Cheese app? So I started to think about my North Star as well. Like, what's my aim? Like, I want people to spend time in the app, right? But I don't want them to be daily active because it doesn't make any sense. But I want them to pick it up when they want to. I want them to pick it up when they think, cheese. So they think, cheese, they want to use the app. So how can I measure that? So it's like, so I use a company called Amplitude, do product analytics. So they've got a really good free tier. So any indie maker can use them, which is absolutely fantastic. And you actually get quite a lot from the free tier. So you can map customer journeys and user journeys within your app on their free tier. So I can see exactly how people are using my app, which is amazing. So you can see, like, for example, I have it set up. So one of the things that I really prioritized recently was making sure that people could find the right cheeses. And so we updated our search because one of the highest things that people were getting were search with no results. So they're obviously trying to, and then they'd exit the app. So I'd see the customer journey of them coming in, searching for a cheese, search for no results, leave the app. And I'm like, well, they're not getting value. They're trying to find something and they're not finding it. And so I can't go any level deeper than that. But what I can do is go, okay, let's try and understand the search queries. So I got a print out of all the search queries, looked at what we had, what we didn't have. It's like, okay, how can we fix this problem? So I really try and then focus on the metrics of what makes sense and what I can do to try and improve the metrics that make sense to me. So the people that go to that for cheese. And so if they're not finding what they need, they're not going to come back. So that's what I want people to do. So it's trying to focus that energy in that way, and that's free. That doesn't take. It just takes my time in looking at it. And I don't think a lot of people really try and understand that. They're really focused on acquisition, but trying to understand there's no point in getting 10 million users using the app if they all experience the same thing and you haven't fixed that problem. So if you spend all your time on acquisition, then you won't fix the inherent problems that you have with your product in the first place. And I know there are many, like there are so many things that we need to make better, but it's like, where do you focus that and what can draw you to the right thing? So there are a number of different things we're thinking about how to draw people back into the app, like different notifications and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's trying to understand how they're using the app now and trying to leverage that, really.
I've heard a couple times we and the Cheezus team who is the Cheezus team? How many people are we
It's just me,
talking?
basically. I say we all the time. I do this for
Yeah.
everything I work on, but it's just me. I do all this work. Ahmed, my Egyptian mate, he'll do the coding that I ask him to do.
Hmm.
But like I do all the design. I designed all of the current app for good and bad. Like, I'm not a designer at all. But yeah, all of that. I've designed all the new stuff for the purchasing side as well. I pretty much do everything. He just does the technical implementation, and he did all the machine learning stuff. So anything back end or app wise, he'll do. But it's all architected and designed by me, and everything
Yeah,
else.
I feel like for appearing legit, like I always use we too when I'm thinking about the company, and I don't necessarily think of companies in an I way. I always think of it as a we thing, and like the things we need to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes if I'm working too much, then rarely it happens where I'm actually talking about myself and I say we instead of I. Like, we need to get a haircut. We need to go to the doctor. We need to clean up the bathroom.
No, it's just me. It's like, why do you keep saying we? And I do it in my day job as well. And so it was me that did it. I don't know what. It's a really bad habit. I do it all the
I
time.
don't know if it's a bad habit. I think it's a good habit in a lot of ways because in work, that's like you're kind of giving credit to the team and like unseen support sometimes.
Yeah, no,
And like
I
a
agree.
business deal, you're kind of setting it up already emotionally as like, hey, this is something we're doing together. It's not an I versus you. It's a us. It's a we. I wouldn't say it's a bad habit. I think it's a good habit to have, at least in the business context.
To be fair, I
Although
do
it
have
can
some.
backfire in like advertising, right? Like
Yeah,
when you're
yeah.
trying to tell a story to get people to buy, like they connect more personally with an I story than a we story.
Exactly, and that's where I try to be better in that sense because I know when I write stuff, it needs to be more personal because it is coming from me. It's not coming from anyone else, and so I do try and make sure that I have to proofread my stuff, so I do actually do that. But to be fair, I do also have like a very part-time CFO who works in London. Um, she's absolutely amazing, and I don't need her really for anything apart from filing our taxes most of the time. I'm like, she's like, I've done your taxes, by the way, and I'm like, oh yeah, cheers, thanks. And like,
How did you
and
get
so
a part-time CFO?
so one of the things I'm really good at is like selling a vision and getting people on board with the vision. And so I just recruited them part time, and I was like, look, you can have a 10% stake in Cheezus. So she's a shareholder, and it originally was going to be more involved, and now it's less involved. But at the same time, I know that if I called on her, she'd be like, don't worry, I've already done this, I've already done that, and so she's good like that, and I'm really good because I absolutely hate that. And she was one of the first people that sat down and was like, let's work out the fastest path for us to get to revenue, what that looks like, how we're going to get there. So she asks the right like financial questions, and I 100% if I was ever going to hire someone, like if I was like scaling any sort of startup, any sort of business that I was building, the first person I'd actually get would be a CFO. You can outsource pretty much everything else. Like
Why?
because it builds the best foundation on, and it's playing to my weaknesses as well. Like I suck at making sure that we have all the right stuff in place, making sure that we're compliant, making sure we're all our taxes done, but also it really keeps track of how much you're spending, asking the right questions, like why are you spending this, and it's that kind of other like person on your shoulder to just sanity check you, because I think as a founder I have a tendency to then run away and this is what we're going to do, and it's like, and there's just that voice of reason to just be like, but is this going to get us to where we want to be? Where is it we want to be? What are we aiming for? And I never found that with any other counterpart. I've had CTOs in the past that obviously just want to build stuff. I've had marketing people that just want to go out and do the marketing, but I've never had someone that had that balance of just sanity checking why we were doing stuff in the first place when it came to the money, and that's ultimately then what matters, like why are we doing this in the first place. And so this is why, like for me, playing to my weaknesses, having that a CFO would be 100% my first hire, because I know that, for example, I could outsource my development, whether it's done in the right way doesn't really matter. We can figure that out in the end. But one of the key things that you don't want to get wrong from the start is your finances and everything like that. just making sure that that's right. So that's one of the things that I think is super important. And they tend to then work with lawyers and stuff like that. Like she had experience in raising money, doing all balance sheets, doing financial projections. So if you are looking to scale, she knows exactly what you need to be able to do that. If you want to raise, know exactly what to do that. So it's all those things that if you haven't considered them yet, they're already thinking about them. So having a good CFO that knows these things and has experience in raising money, working for startups and stuff like that, I found it super valuable, and 100% it would be my first hire.
So for the founder listening who all of a sudden really wants a CFO, how do they find one?
That is a good question. I've known I've hired a couple of, I think 3 part-time CFOs in my time. And one was done by AngelList back in the day, but that was quite a while ago. And the other one was done by LinkedIn. So I used to spend quite more time on LinkedIn than I do now. But yeah, it takes a lot of time. I spent a lot of time speaking to people, interviewing them, talking to them, trying to find someone like-minded that truly had that experience that I felt that I could connect with on a way that I knew that they wouldn't bullshit me. They would, and it's that communication side. So communication was super important to me. Someone that might call me out, someone that might ask the difficult questions, and someone that I thought would have all the experience in those, like I said, like in startups, in raising and stuff like that, and someone that wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty, wasn't just an accounting person, someone that had that experience in actually running the finances side of things. And so, yeah, I interviewed probably 10 different potential CFOs at that time. I went through probably about 50 different CVs. And so, yeah, it was a slog, but you just got to talk, you got to kiss a lot of frogs to find that one. But yeah, no, it was.
That's a good metaphor. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, it was. I quite enjoy the whole recruitment process, even though it's hard work, but it's hard finding right people for anything. It's difficult, I think, especially when you're paying in sweat equity. You're like, oh, yeah. I want to do some work for nothing, like it's just like, yeah, wicked, and that's a real struggle. Like, and trying to find people that are as motivated as you're never going to do. Like, it's your passion, it's your dream. You're trying to bring people along for that, so it's very hard, especially if you expect them to do stuff. And I found this with like technical people. If you're expecting them to build stuff, it's very difficult to hire that. Like, it's very difficult to hire that on sweat equity. This is why it's easier to do it on other roles, more strategic roles. Way easier to do sweat equity. The rest of it I'd outsource. That would be my biggest lesson. Like, hire the strategic roles that can come up with the more strategy. But when it comes to the tactical implementation, if you're hiring them part-time on sweat equity, 100% outsource that stuff to just be tactical and get it done, because you can do that cheap enough now in different places. But to come up with the actual strategy, that's often the hardest part about doing it. So hire the strategic ones as sweat equity, because it won't take as much of their spare time, and then sell them your vision on that. And then tactically, when you want to get stuff done, just outsource it and get it done that way.
So are you giving them the equity up front, or are you doing like some kind of like 4-year cliff type deal?
Okay. Yeah, 4-year cliff. But to be fair, I'm fairly easy. I'm not like old days it used to be. I've got into battles with this in the past, and they're
not making a salary in the meantime, right? They're just...
No, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't ask a lot. Like, I did have someone that was in a technical role, and their day job was just too busy, and so we just cut ties in that way. And
yeah.
I've done this in the past where I've worked with friends that in this way, and it involves some really difficult conversations where you're not putting in what you want out, like and this person at the time wanted like 20%, and they were arguing they wanted more, and I was like, yeah, but you're not putting in the time to warrant this. And in fact, their day job got even busier, and they're like, I can't put in that time. And I'm okay, well then we need to readdress this. And I said at the time, this is nothing to do with our personal relationship. This is 100% around our business relationship, and that's different.
Yeah.
It's 100% different, and you have to separate those. But it's difficult. Like, hiring people in that way, it can be, yeah. You can lose friendships quite easily over that stuff, working with friends.
How do you structure that pitch? So, like, you've got an idea, don't really have much to show for it yet. What are you telling someone to kind of sell them on your vision and get them on board and for just working for sweat equity?
So for me, it's all about explaining the problem, like the size of the problem. I go straight, that's me, tell the story. I tell the story about how it came about. My vision is what I want to be in the future. I want to be like that cheesemonger in your pocket. I want to be able to help cheese producers reach new audiences. I want to be able to go on and so for me, it's like no matter what it is, and this is on different ones. It's like really trying to. I don't really kind of like have a strategy. It's just kind of what I do, and it's telling the story of the problem, And if people can understand the weight of the problem and how this solution solves that, I think that they can really buy into that. But that's where you have to find the right people. You have to find the right like-minded people, and if you found that person, if you get a decent response back. So if I'm there explaining exactly my vision and my future vision, like where we are now, the journey to this point, but where I want to be, and that whole kind of market for it. If I get a sense that someone is really into that, and that's something that they can really relate to, then that's something that I will build on, and I think that's important. But you have to find someone that really gets that vision. And so my day job is in product management. So it's I'm head of product excellence for a pharmaceutical company. So I deal with like product management processes and stuff. And I've interviewed for a number of head of product roles at companies, and it's funny because there are a number of companies that after the interview I'm like, it's not my bag, because if I don't get the vision or what they're doing, I'm sure it's great, and I'm sure it's a great product, and I'm sure they're successful companies, and that's great. They want people to take it further. But if it's not something that's truly relatable for me, I don't want to do it, because for me, you need to be bought into that vision to be able to drive that further forward. So even if it's a profitable thing, I wouldn't want to work with someone that doesn't truly get where that product is going or where you want it to go. So that for me is the biggest part of finding people. It's making sure that they are truly bought into where you want to go and where you're taking it, because especially if you're on a small team, and even if it's the CFO, it doesn't really matter, because you want them to be thinking in that same way. Like we're all driving towards that same vision, and I think that that's the most important part. So that is for me one of the biggest things that you would ever have. Like, I couldn't work on a product that I didn't truly believe was providing value or I could get behind, because I couldn't drive it in that way.
So to kind of close things out, for that aspiring indie maker, bootstrapped entrepreneur who's listening to this, what advice do you give them?
It's a good question. I think the best advice. I would probably say that try and learn as much as possible. Like, go out and try and learn as much as possible, but learn by doing. But don't learn by chucking money at stuff. Like, it is that whole thing about getting your hands dirty, experiment. Because I work in product, it's all about experiments. So everything's an experiment. I've made so many mistakes in my past by doing things thinking it was the right thing, but not truly experimenting in those micro experiment ways. Like everything's an assumption until we test it. Like, we don't know what our customer channels are. We don't know how we're going to distribute. That's why we test them. We have assumptions and we think we're going to reach people by Twitter. Does it work? Like, go out and test it. Everything you do, validate. So have an idea, go for it. I love a business model canvas. Business model canvas for me. So I started a Discord actually, because I have a YouTube channel as well, because obviously. And so I try and direct people towards my Discord. And it's only small, but I love it, because I've got like people in there, like kids in there at like 15, and they come up with an idea, and I'm like, do a business model canvas. And I was talking a kid through, this 15-year-old kid in class who was doing a business model canvas. And I was like, this is your start for everything, because it gets out your head onto paper. But everything on that paper is an assumption. You don't know that that's true until you test it. All you have to do from there is experiment. And if it's all wrong, do it again. Start again. It doesn't matter. It's a living document. Like, start getting something down and then test it. The amount you learn validating those assumptions is huge. And then as you start talking to people, you start experimenting, you then go, I found something out I didn't even realize. And it just makes everything just come together. So I would 100% say that just get out there, put something down, test, and do those experiments, and make sure you don't let 100%, the biggest thing I would say is don't let your pride and ego take over the data. Because the amount of times we get so behind an idea that we don't listen to the data that says you don't have product market fit or no one's going to buy this, that we just want to push it on regardless. Because we're like, no, we know it's a great idea. The data says it isn't. The data says you're not going to sell it. So listen to the data. Put your ego to one side. Listen to the data. Test everything. Validate it. That's what I would say.
Did you test with data, Cheezus?
No, because I'm shit at using my own advice.
All right, just check it.
Essentially, I built it first and then put it out there, and then I do things. So I didn't test the whole thing in the first place because it's kind of evolved, but I for all things like distribution channels or acquisition channels, I test those. So the all of those sorts of things I now test, but the idea in the first place, I did the same thing. I went, I want to build it, so I'm going to build it. I didn't really care, and then I tried to work out. I thought I had an idea, but everything on top of that, in terms of how I'm going to do the business, how the business model is going to work, how I'm going to acquire users, how it's going to do, I made sure that I used like the product analytics. I test my acquisition channels and stuff like that. So I do experiments all the time now, but the initial one, no, it was purely a case of, and this was back, I started this in 2019. So yeah, I've left it. I've gone off a number of times and thought, I'll be fine. I'll come back at some point. So it's been purely like, yeah, not abandoned, but just left on its own devices for a few times. And this is one of the ones where I've given it more attention now. But yeah, I tend to validate things a lot more now than I did back then.
If your product is lean enough, if you can launch fast enough, then I think the product itself is the experiment.
Yeah,
if you're not wasting tons of money launching something, then the market tells you the answer for it. You don't have to study it. Just get it out there.
I completely agree. And I think nowadays you can do that so much more than you could before. I think you can get stuff out, and like you said,
this is the value too of the audience building. Because if you build that audience, you've got enough distribution to run these tests. If you don't have any audience, then maybe budget in that test like a few $100s for like paid ads or something, just some way to get enough traffic to actually validate the idea.
I agree. Or you find places where your audience are. You've got to find, if you don't have your own audience, like your own following via whatever it might be, find out where your people are. But that then comes back to the whole, in my product head, it's like, who are the people you're targeting? What are your customers?
Yeah.
Like, where are they? That you will find a spot where it might be a Facebook group, it might be Reddit, it might be something. You'll find your users somewhere. And I had this conversation with someone on Twitter the other day, because they've got an app that does stuff with babies, like it's tracking the feeds and stuff, and they really wanted to get it in like 9 to 5 Mac or something like that, the Apple publication or whatever. And I just went, devil's advocate, why do you want it in there? And they went, well, for marketing. And I said, but are they your customers? Like, are they your customers that are reading that? Well, I can't imagine they are, but I'm just going to ask you the question, like, are they your customers? And I went, probably not. Where are your customers? It's like, well, probably Facebook groups or, TikTok. And I went, okay, so do you really want to get it in there? Like, would you focus your energy? And he went, actually, that's a really good point. And so it's like, you've got to find out where your customers are. And
yes,
having an audience is great if they're your customers. But if you're building something that your Twitter followers aren't interested in,
then your audience doesn't matter for anything.
Yeah, hence the reason I don't actually often talk about Cheezus, apart from it's the whole like building side of things. So I'll talk about the things I'm doing from a building a thing, but I don't promote it as in, because my audience isn't on Twitter. Hence the reason I'm there trying to utilize other channels, because what's the point in trying to acquire people on a channel that is not effective in that way? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think you've just got to find that audience and then try and maximize that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot wrapped up in the idea of like product market fit. It's the product, it's the market, it's how are you going to distribute to the market? What is that audience you're trying to serve? How can you effectively reach them? Can you effectively, cost efficiently reach them at all? People just think a lot about their customer and their product, but not necessarily how they're going to get the two of them in the same room together.
Yeah, and it's like I always think this as well, and it's like because we often have like multiple different distribution channels as well, and it's like what's the most effective? Like where are you actually converting people? Like where does it make a difference? What's the most quality channel? Because that's where you should spend your time. Like if you're not converting, like it makes less sense to do. And so, like for example, I spent all this time doing like TikTok stuff, and it's good for building the audience on TikTok. And I know over time, my assumption is that it will pay dividends over time, because I've only been doing it a bit, but I'm playing the numbers game at the moment. But from an acquisition point of view, I track all that, so I have short links and stuff like that, so I can see where things come from, and so I know that I have had 6 people use my short link from TikTok out of all the people that have viewed my stuff. And so you go, well, that's a fairly poor conversion rate of even just clicking or going to that link versus my app store. That's a way better acquisition channel. But from a marketing point of view and from a brand awareness point of view, it's pretty good. So it's like you have to understand what provides the value and where. And if you understand it and you still do, that's fine. But I think a lot of people are like, well, Twitter's where my audience is. It's like, yeah, but is it valuable? Like, are you actually converting to paid customers via that? Is it getting you money, or do they come from different ways? They might even come from a search engine. Do you know this? And I think a lot of people just don't understand those things. And I think they're so important, because if you're spending all of this time or money on trying to convert your users, you need to understand your cost of customer acquisition versus your lifetime value of customers, and we don't. I mean, for me, it's free, so right now I'm like, it's whatever, and everything's an expense. But when you have like a model and you know what you want from a value from that customer, a lot of people can't articulate how much it costs them to get a customer in the first place.
Ross, it was great having you on. Where should the people find you?
Oh, good question. All over, anywhere. No, you can follow me on Twitter at Random Shenanigans. That's probably the best place. But yeah, that's my.
And if you're looking for the Vivino of Cheese, go to Cheezus.com.
Yeah, I was going to say, like they know now.
It's in there.
They'll forget the name Cheezus, but all they'll remember is Vivino for cheese. So I don't even need to pitch it. It's in there. It's fine. Yeah. But yeah, follow me on Twitter. Like I cover most of the stuff in there anyway. I'm just here for a good time. That's all. It's all good fun.
Well, we had fun. Thanks, Ross.
Yeah, likewise.
See you on
Thanks,
the
man. It's been great chatting to you.